Yeah, whatever you want.
Because I hear this, this used to come up a lot. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it or care, whatever. Do you ever consider the implications? And I know people have thrown this at you a lot about like covering like drill rap or making money off of that stuff, like from the perspective of, you know, like being white guys who are like outside of that world a little bit. Have you ever like seriously engaged with that, or do you just like fuck that? I don't care about this type of conversation. Or
I debate this all the time. I'm quite comfortable like debating that topic personally.
I feel like my typical response would be a little bit more emotional of like, no, I don't give a fuck, like whatever you're talking about.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
he could probably give a better intellectualized version of it. Yeah.
Well, I think there's sometimes it's just like I'm like a very easy target to be like, well, you're a white guy making money off of this thing, but it's just like no one ever goes at the record labels that support and distribute this kind of music and this very negative, murderous message. Very rarely are the rappers held accountable for the people that are actually committing violence and actually like broadcasting this message and convincing a generation of people that think it's cool. So for me, I feel like my real defense to that is that like I'm actually trying to bring like a very thoughtful and responsible approach to this space that's extremely lawless and out of control and negative. And I feel like the racial element is just like such a red herring that it's just like, I'm white, like, sorry, you know, a lot of the rappers are black. But that's just is what it is. That doesn't have any bearing on like why I do what I do.
The message of his videos, if you've ever watched one, is like, I'm gonna archive and like speak on all this crazy shit that happened, but this shit is bad, and this is like, this should stop, and like, you know, we need to talk about this, and you know, it's notable because it's attached to these rappers who are very well known, but ultimately, like, this is very bad. Like, then like frequently I have to answer for that as well, where people act like, no, like you're excited about this, like you want this to continue, and I'm like, no, like absolutely not, like, but I don't think that us speaking about it is going to create more of it. To me, that's just like the ultimate low IQ take. That would be like saying, like, because we're speaking about a bunch of shit that Trump is doing that we think is wrong, that then we're somehow encouraging it. It's like, no, we're just like chronicling it and speaking about it and passing judgment on it.
Brandon Buckingham had a good defense to this when they were saying the same thing at him after the whole YBC Duel thing, and like he was basically saying, like, blaming me for the violence is like blaming the weatherman for it being raining. I'm just here reporting on it and spreading the word and trying to give a responsible take on it. But ultimately, like, and that's why I try and trace the history back, because like a lot of the reasons for things to be so violent and messed up in these communities, if I'm completely honest about what I think the causes are, it's like you trace things back to then you've got like, you know, Section 8 housing, the ghettoization of certain areas of America where, you know, gangs have formed. One of the points that I find very interesting is like one of the reasons that often people say like the Crips got started in Los Angeles is because that they didn't let like young black kids into the Boy Scouts of America, and there was so much racism after World War II that like a lot of black people had taken these industrial jobs away from white people, that there was just all of this institutional racism that ultimately had this side effect of creating these street gangs of these groups that they were like scared of the police. They wanted to police their own communities, but then it became this lawless thing. And just so much of it, I feel like if you trace it back, it just goes back to like discrimination. If you trace it back long enough, I just feel like the disadvantaged urban communities that really suffer and deal with these gang problems, it's like, I think you could trace it all the way back to slavery, to the point where essentially it's like this group of people have basically been completely marginalized and like rejected from mainstream parts of societies. Like young black kids can't join the Boy Scouts. Well, okay, what are they going to go and do with their time? And really, it's like I try and communicate that in my videos. Like I talk about, you know, like the Great Migration and white flight and how certain areas that became gang strongholds have kind of been like neglected by, you know, the government or kind of like certain groups of people. And I just think that it's like, it's important to have those conversations. I think just because I'm white doesn't necessarily mean that I shouldn't be able to talk about these things. In the same way that it's like, you know, it's difficult if you're a white rapper, but you know, whether you're black or you're white, if you've got a talent for making music, you should be able to do that. I don't think anyone should be able to say, well, you can't talk about hip hop or gangster rappers because you're white. That's racism to me. But no one really wants to hear me say that.
And really, like, I feel like you're someone who has the courage to say those kind of things that oftentimes aren't really said by members of people who are like directly involved in that community. And I'm gonna be real, like, it is kind of hard for me to imagine a post-gang violence America, because it just seems like such a natural reaction to like needing to survive in dangerous environments. Because it's like, okay, let's say we were all brothers, we live in a house. Well, when we leave the house, it makes sense for us to decide, hey, if you get beat up, I'm going to go and I'm going to beat up the guy who beat you up, because we're brothers, we have to stick together. So then that gets applied to the whole block. And then that gets applied to maybe a couple surrounding blocks. And then all of a sudden it's basically a gang. And gun violence is on the table because that's the extreme lengths that are culture has basically got to. And there's another neighborhood over on the other side of town, and at some point we all go to the club and somebody from that neighborhood kills one of you guys, and then basically it's like on me, if I want to have respect within our culture, that I need to kill somebody from that area. And that's basically like the short version of how all of these gang rivalries become a thing. And it's like, I don't really know how you unwind that. I feel like in a place like LA, we've kind of seen LA be a little bit better at that. The murder rate is like down significantly from the 80s or 90s or whatever, and we see it quite frequently where there's some inventive policing that has kind of been introduced in terms of these programs that basically like the cops will like intervene after somebody gets killed in a neighborhood to try to like lessen the chance of revenge killings or whatever. But it is kind of hard for me to imagine how that completely changes when shooting and killing somebody is not so uncommon. Like obviously that is going to create a rivalry that's basically going to just promote more violence. And unless you're able to like kind of stall that out or thwart that and then maybe find a way for that to maintain as the status quo for a couple of decades, it's just like we see peace treaties attempted all the time in LA or not necessarily like real peace treaties, but like call to arms to like basically say let's like not kill each other in this environment. Brick Baby, actually one of my co-hosts, he kind of like summed it up to me at one point. He said like if you really want peace in a city, the old heads in the gang basically need to make it clear that if you go and kill somebody from a rival territory, then we're going to kill you. And that's basically the only thing that would ultimately, it needs to become unpalatable enough to go and do a revenge killing that you feel like you might really die. That's like maybe the only thing that'll actually stop this tit for tat.
One of it goes into the kind of the hypocrisy thing again, also by conservatives, but it's always interesting to me that they'll look at like girls and OnlyFans and they'll be like, oh, this is fatherless behavior. Or they'll talk about like the importance of the family or the importance of, having, good parents and good, you got to do well in school and all this. And then they'll look at black people and it's like the first, like the first like desegregated school attenders are in their like 60s. Like this is very recent history, but then for those communities, they don't apply the same thought at all. Where it's like, well, why aren't you over this yet? And it's like, bro, we're like, civil rights is like barely history. Like there are like so many people. Yeah, it's very frustrating that people are always expecting like such quick fixes to that. Meanwhile, like they recognize in their own families and stuff, like if you abandon this child or if you fuck this up, like parents will have this idea that like a kid can grow up in a neighborhood surrounded by violence and he should be able to like pull himself up and make it out of there okay. Meanwhile, like if my kid plays too many violent video games, he's gonna be fucked for life. And it's like, what the fuck? Yeah, it's. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, and I feel like it's very difficult to really see it ending. There's so many more complicated things, then you've got like institutional racism within the police. Those communities aren't being properly policed. Like if the police were really solving some of these murders and delivering justice to that community, there'd probably be less of a need for people to take that justice into their own hands, which only perpetuates this cycle of violence. And again, like, you even go back, like I think one of the last peace treaties that I knew about in the whole LA gang politics was like after the 1992 riots, and that was all sparked off by like the Rodney King case, and then like the officers being acquitted, and then it was just LA was on fire for a period of time, and then the gangs kind of quieted things down. But it's like that's what it took for even a brief respite in the gang war to go on, and it's like the problem's so complicated.
And I think like a lot of people think that the solution to gang violence might be just like everybody getting along, and I think what's actually like way more likely is just like a cease to like the killing, but like they're not like trying to like be best friends. They're still going to be massively separated. It just needs to like change the cultural norms of like people killing each other.
I think, but yeah, it's also like you need like opportunities and stuff, right? Like if you want to talk about like honor culture between like millionaires and shit, like I don't like. I have a lot of money. I've got a successful business. Like I'm not looking to fucking, if some guy wants to talk shit on me, knock yourself out. Like I have way more going on in my life than to, put it on the line for this. But if you're somebody you legitimately don't have much else, like if I imagine, I don't know the position, but I would imagine it would feel really shitty when you have like nothing going for you in life. You don't have a family legacy. Your home might be fucked. Your education is fucked. You don't have any like good career opportunities available to you. And some guy's like, okay, well, if these people, jump your friend or, talk shit or whatever, you just have to like let it slide. And it's like, what the fuck else is this guy going to do? What else, especially like as a man, right? Like what else do you have in life to even protect?
That's why people act like it would be so simple for Lil Durk to have just said, you know what, you killed my friend, but fuck it. I don't care. I'm going to focus on my career, my
Yeah.
family, and my business.
I'm going to go into Microsoft today and do my computer job, and I'm going to ignore all of this because I'm better than that. I want to contribute to my pension and 401k. Yeah.
But regardless of him being a millionaire, he would have basically been like the first of the lineage that he comes from to have taken on that attitude. And that attitude would have been viewed so negatively within his own community, like that. It is kind of hard to imagine, and that the result is him putting out an album. Like his most recent upload on his second channel is basically about how after Lil Durk paid to get this dude killed in LA, that he basically put out a whole album with his crew rapping about it nonstop, and that's kind of bizarre to a lot of people. To us, it's not really even shocking anymore.
Well, it's like he had a whole crew of people basically just like, when are we going to get revenge for this thing? He's got all the money, he's got all the resources to basically make this thing happen. And you're right, it would have been near impossible for him to say, I'm going to be the bigger man and do this. And that's why I feel like in this video, I'm going to have a certain degree of sympathy for Dirk, because it's kind of like, look, I haven't had my friend killed in front of me and it be broadcast on camera and be mocked by the entire Twitter over my friend getting killed and me not getting revenge. So I do have a certain degree of sympathy for, like, he's between a rock and a hard place, really, because if he doesn't do that in his community, he's kind of ostracized.